As a uni student, the thing I loved about pastas is you could pretty much take anything that was left in your fridge or in your pantry, put it together and end up with a pasta. Now, once when I was at uni, one of my pastas consists of penne and condensed milk. We're not doing that today. We're gonna make a little rigatoni with a nice little chorizo and macadamia crumb. I'm gonna roast off some tomatoes, serve it with a couple of cheeses, and it's a beautiful little pasta which you can make in about 15 minutes. Have some boiling salted water, which I'm gonna add our little rigatoni to. Now, I'm a big fan of rigatoni, mainly just because I like the name. It makes me sound like I'm in a gangster movie. Rigatoni. So I'll pop that in. I'm gonna use about half a box, which should serve about 2 hungry people. Some cherry tomatoes. I'm gonna put half of them, or a couple of handfuls of them, into a little roasting tray. I've got my oven preheated to 210, and I'm just gonna blister them. So I'll put half in there, a little bit of salt on them, and a nice drizzle of our lemon-infused oil. I'm gonna roast them for 15 minutes, as long as it takes our pasta to cook. So we'll give them a little swish, pop them in. And then to go with it, we're gonna get our pan on here. I've got a cold pan, starting with a cold pan. I'm gonna throw in some macadamias, a good handful of macadamias which I've chopped up. Some chorizo, about half a chorizo sausage that's been really finely diced. A couple of cloves of garlic. This will take about 10 or 15 minutes. We're gonna roast that off. And that's gonna be a nice little crumb to go over the top of our pasta. So you're looking for flavoursome, tastier. The pasta is the driver. That's where the bulk of the meal comes from. And then just think about different ways in which you can incorporate flavour. So with the tomatoes, serving them 2 different ways. One roasted, the other one nice and fresh. A little crumb to go on top, which will have lots of flavour. Then we're gonna finish off with a couple of cheeses, a Persian feta, which will crumble through the pasta to become part of the sauce, and a little bush pepper, which will grate over the top. And it's a simple pasta, some parsley on top, and you're laughing. I've strained my pasta and put it straight back into the pot. Add a little bit of our lemon-infused canola. Give that a stir through. And that just keeps everything nice and loose, so the pasta doesn't stick together. I'm gonna pop this into a bowl. And then some of the feta, I'm gonna break up and put in with our bowl, because I want it to melt and become part of the sauce. And the heat left over from the pasta will help do that. And some will hold back and we'll serve fresh on top. Because there's no real sauce with this, the pasta, as I said, is the driving force. I'm gonna try and get as much of the sauce out of this cheese as we can. One more little bit. Just wash my hands. So give that a stir through. And you can see what I mean by that. Cheese is starting to melt, it's breaking up more, and that becomes our sauce. Now in with that, we're gonna put our fresh tomatoes. So a good handful of the fresh tomatoes, which I'll just chop in half and toss in. And we've still got our roasted tomatoes in the oven, which I'll take out just before we plate up. So a handful of the fresh cherry tomatoes in there. And then I'm gonna pop in some of that crumb that we made with the macadamia, chorizo and garlic. So I'll grab that. Now I want to leave some of this to put over the top, so I'll put probably half of this crumb in now. I'll need a pinch of salt in there with all that as well, because there's so many tomatoes in there and tomatoes love salt. So a good pinch of salt. Give that a stir again to bring everything together. And now for our roasted tomatoes. So we'll get them out of the oven. Now they've only had 15 minutes in there, so they've only just sort of started to split. And that's okay. Some of that juice that comes out is fine as well, because I'm going to use that. So tip them straight in. Bring that back, give it another stir. And now our sauce is starting to come together. So we've got the juice coming out of the tomato. And that is looking, if you think about 15-minute pasta with stuff we found in the pantry, that's looking pretty good. So we'll tip this into a bowl. I don't reckon we're going to need all of it. There's a lot there. That's a good university meal. And then some of that crumb that you've got left over to go on top, so you've got a nice crunchy top. So back to the crumb, some crunch on top, and then I'll pick just some fresh parsley to go on top of that as well, just to give it some colour, more for presentation than anything else. So if you wanted to, you could give it a little drizzle of oil, but I don't reckon it needs it. I reckon that's pretty good for a 15-minute meal. There you go, Jamie. What do you think of that? 15 minutes and we put that together.